This is a KUNV Studios original program.
The content of this program does not reflect the views or opinions of 91.5 Jazz and More, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, or the Board of Regents of the Nevada System of Higher Education.
Lights, camera, action. Welcome to Rebel Film Friday. We talk about films of all kinds every Friday at 6 p.m. And I'm your host, Cameron. Hello, Rebels, and welcome back to Rebel Film Friday. I am your host, Cameron Margolis, and I am joined by Jaden Simpson.
Hey.
And Corbin Song.
What's up?
And we have some special episodes for you over the next few weeks, because here at Rebel Film Friday, for the entirety of February, in the spirit of love, we will be covering romance movies. And we are kicking off Romance Month with Baby Driver, a romance action comedy released in 2017, directed by Edgar Wright, starring Ansel Elgort, Jon Bernthal, and Jon Hamm. Baby Driver was released to critical and financial success and was nominated for several awards, including the Oscars for film editing, and sound mixing at the 2017 Oscars. If you haven't seen the movie, we recommend going to watch it before listening to this episode because we will be spoiling the entirety of the film. But if you just need a refresher on the plot of Baby Driver, it stars Ansel Elgort as our main character, Baby, who got into a car crash when he was young that impaired his hearing and killed his parents. He was then caught trying to break into the car of a criminal named Doc, who makes him his getaway driver for many heists for years to come. Years later, Baby is about to be done with driving for Doc, and his debt for him is going to be paid off for stealing that car, when he meets a waitress named Debora at a diner he goes to. He falls madly in love with her, and they start a nice little romance. Baby is also taking care of an elderly deaf man named Joseph, who encourages Baby to give up his life of crime and earn an honest living. Baby is continually forced into this life of crime until a heist goes wrong, causing all of his life to be thrown into danger. And, without further ado, let's start this killer track. All right, so, first question on the movie. Throughout Baby Driver, we were shown many examples of love and romance. Of course, this being our Love and Romance Month, we have to focus on that part of the film because that's kind of the theme that we want to touch on. We see young, innocent love in Baby and Debora's relationship, a nurturing love between Baby and Joseph, a lustful, destructive love between Buddy and Darling, along with many others. How do the relationships in Baby Driver, and specifically the relationships Baby experiences and observes in his life, affect his character arc throughout the movie?
I think in general, this entire movie, like we're saying, is very much a romantic movie. And it doesn't really have to just be about the relationships about people. Like even with Baby and his music, there's a romantic relationship between the two because simply for how important it is to his character. And so one of the things is because of the fateful crash that they allude to and then kind of bring some more light to towards the end of the movie, music becomes essential basically to who Baby is. And so it's like there's all kinds of relationships of love and romance in the movie.
What I noticed is Baby kind of takes these sentences from all of his like lovely relationships with people and maybe not so lovely, like with what were their names?
The criminals that he works with?
Criminals, yeah.
Well, there's Buddy, and there's Darling, and then there's also Bats.
Well, Buddy and Darling in particular, they talked about that one restaurant, finest whining and dining in town.
Bacchanalia.
There you go.
And then he said the same exact words to Debora, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yes, he does.
And then was his name Joseph?
Joseph, yeah, the elderly deaf man that he lives with and cares for.
He tells Baby that he's not meant for the world. He's in the world of crime, and he says the same words to Debora right before he turns himself in at the end.
Another example of that is when he's watching Monsters, Inc. He says the "We're a team" line to Doc, and then later on, it's kind of Doc even kind of calls him out for saying that line because he's like, I knew that sounded familiar. And then he says that it was one of his nephew's favorite movies. So I think that is also kind of a big part of his character.
I absolutely agree. And I think that seeing how much music means to Baby, and along with that, other forms of media like shows, all the shows that he watches towards the beginning of the movie, like that he flicks through on the different channels on the TV, all of those lines are referenced later in the film. So he's remixing things from his everyday life, from the music he listens to, from the shows and movies he watches, so that he can better connect with other people.
Yeah. I think another thing with that whole kind of like, I guess maybe not mimicking, but just repeating thing is because his hearing is impaired, like he connects a lot of his relationships with things that other people say, and that to the whole kind of character development thing that shows through the entire movie. And I thought that was really well done with the storytelling.
I just have a question. I don't know how to regard Doc in terms of Baby. I feel like he could be called his partner, his friend, but maybe also a father figure. I want to know what you guys think.
I think... Do you want to go ahead?
Oh, no, you go ahead first.
I think it's kind of a love-hate relationship because obviously since Baby's parents died at such a relatively early age, and the fact that his home wasn't really a good one, as it's revealed later through scenes of flashbacks of his mom and his dad presumably fighting, I think in a way Baby latches on to Doc in a certain way, like as a father figure, but then obviously their backgrounds or at least their characters are very different, so it kind of has a conflict there as well, because like throughout the movie you can kind of see how Baby has conflicting ideas with even his own identity that he eventually gets to at the very end.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say one of the more interesting relationships in the movie is between Doc and Baby's, because it's not your normal father-son relationship. What Doc wants the most out of Baby is basically to be his getaway driver. You know, he's done these heists since he was they said like 12 years old, since he was old enough to see over the dash.
Yeah.
He was driving for him. And that is in reality what Doc wants out of Baby. Meanwhile, Baby is kind of comfortable in this numbness that is the life of crime until he's woken up by the actual violence of it. Because as one of the characters says in the very early part of the movie, that once you get blood on your hands, it doesn't wash off in the sink, right. You know? And that's what is really the kicker that sets the plot into motion, is Baby starting to see, oh, I can't live this life anymore. He's not a violent person. He doesn't want to hurt people. And that really kicks the movie into overdrive.
I think another thing to that point that awakens his kind of like, I suppose, his inner child, or like who he really is meeting Deborah. Like that, obviously it's kind of like a key part in the movie, the new love interest, but to that point, like that is another awakening for Baby's character.
Yeah, and something else I wanted to bring up with Deborah is that she's so important to Baby that she has her like own song in the movie dedicated to her. Deborah by, what was it? It was Beck? Yeah, Deborah by Beck. And then also his mom has a song dedicated to her. So the most like near people in Baby's life, I'd say except for Joseph. I don't think Joseph has a song for him. But those, Deborah and his mom both have songs that are attached to their identities, because that's how Baby perceives the world. He perceives the world through music. Music is a romantic language in of itself. So Baby using music in order to connect his real life and his personal life into that kind of like romanticism, as we were trying to point out.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to add here? No? I think we're good here. All right, but speaking of, music is a huge part of this movie. There's Queen in there, there's Brighton Rock, Carla Thomas singing B-A-B-Y Baby. The soundtrack for Baby Driver is filled with a ton of licensed songs. I think the first one that we hear in that movie is Bell Bottoms. And that's actually what the film was based around. It was the first thing that Edgar Wright wrote for the movie. He wrote the car chase for Bell Bottoms, and he thought, like, wow, this is great. And he expands it into an entire movie. He actually started making this movie in the 90s, and he didn't finish until 2017.
Oh, wow.
Which is crazy. But what I'm trying to say is, what purpose does the use of licensed music serve in this movie?
I think it's something I'll tie it in. Basically, using licensed music gives some sort of grounding to the story. It makes it feel real. And so the thing I was going to mention is like all of the on-site filming. Like it makes the movie, however, I suppose ridiculous the plot or the characters, it has an element of realism to it. And so like with the addition of music that's recognizable to people, it can immerse the audience and make them feel like part of it.
That's an interesting claim that you're making, because I kind of think the opposite. I think that because of this music and because of how overly like stylized the movie is, it makes it almost surreal. Like we're in some sort of fantasy world and we're seeing in. The emotions are real, the characters' journeys are real, but like Baby going to get coffee and seeing the lyrics spray painted on the backgrounds of the buildings makes it kind of feel surreal and makes it feel romanticized, makes it feel like a nice little rom-com action movie.
Yeah, I could agree. Like with the spray paint thing, it could almost be like comic style, like thought bubbles almost that are appearing within the scene. But I don't know.
No, definitely, because point. Edgar Wright also made the Scott Pilgrim movie, and that's based on a comic book.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of the ways that Baby Driver is shot, it's a lot of quick shots too. Every shot has its own purpose, and it's very dynamic, so it makes it feel almost like a comic book or a graphic novel.
It definitely feels based in that graphic novel feel, and also music and romance go hand in hand in this too. You were saying it earlier. We've been saying it the whole time. It's just music and relationships are hand in hand. The song describes the relationship between Debora and Baby, between Baby and his mother, between Baby and his crewmates during the jobs. That's as much as I got out of it, but you guys make good points about the graphic novel stuff.
Yeah, I think Edgar Wright has a very distinctive visual style. Like, you know when you're watching an Edgar Wright movie. A lot of quick cuts, a lot of clever transitions, and I wanted to see if you picked up on any of that, because one of the things I picked up on, and it was a really cool transition, is transitioning from a rotating record into a washing machine. It's very clean. It makes the movie feel like it's alive. Like it feels like its own being, and the style itself is its own form.
A detail that I noticed was in the opening scene where I don't really know what it's called, but like the title screen, I suppose, when it first shows up and boom, Baby Driver.
Yeah, the title card?
The title card. That first scene that then transitions into the bank robbery, the building has two yellow lines that run up, and that I noticed that look like a road. And so it's not only is it in the beginning, but it could also symbolize you're starting your journey within this movie.
Yeah, you're at the beginning of the road, and you have you have a decent bit to go.
Right.
Anything else to say on the music here? Anything on the style? Well, I have a few things I wanted to bring up. Specifically about the action scenes. The action scenes are super stylized, but they're also grounded because they're done practically, like you said earlier. There's a lot of practical on-set filming. They filmed a lot of this in Atlanta. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only place they didn't film on set was the diner. They actually made the diner as a set in LA. But when it comes to doing these stunts practically, when it comes to doing, like, the driving is excellent. As we noted when we watched it, it was that one backward scene where he was like driving backwards and turned around the truck is just fantastic. What does having these action scenes be practical add to the movie? Does it add to any like movie? Does it need to be practical? Or can this be accomplished with CGI? Or what is lost when we use CGI?
It just makes it feel grounded. It makes it feel real. It makes you feel like you could probably be there. I think if it was just CGI, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. It's like half the movie watching him drive around and do 6 stunts. And I enjoy it being real, authentic.
I think nowadays, because CGI is so good, it could, in theory, replace it. But there's always something that is just missing when it isn't practical. And so I know we're kind of I'm going to draw on a different example, but like the most recent Furiosa movie, I think one of the main criticisms of the movie was that they didn't use as many practical effects with the explosions. And so within Baby Driver, the driving scenes, they need it's necessary to feel kind of visceral, kind of real, and so by making them practical, you can do that. Like the one with the truck alley stunt drift, or even the one in the garage where he's driving backwards. Like, just all of that makes it feel very, like Jaden said, very real, very grounded.
Saying real is a really interesting word, because when we try and like make a movie, or when any like filmmaker tries to make a movie, trying to make it seem real is such an interesting term, because sometimes the plots are really far out there, yet people can still say it's like realistic. And I think the reason that we want this kind of car chase thing to feel realistic, and why CGI probably wouldn't be the best fit here, is we want it to feel like it has weight.
Right.
I feel like if it was CGI, we wouldn't feel the weight of the car. We wouldn't experience the acceleration. It would just feel like it's weightless.
Right.
And on top of that, these are just really sick car stunts that can be pulled off practically. So Edgar Wright decided, why not? We should go and actually do these car stunts. And it looks amazing. It's very, I don't know what the word is for it, but it's the action it's realistic, but it's also stylized.
Extraordinary.
It's it's extraordinary. There you go. I really like how all the action is shot. Mm-hmm. The shots are stylized, but the actual action is real. Like the stunt driving is real. Him running on foot through the mall and Peachtree Center, that's real.
Yeah.
And it all like combines to play together to make this really nice action movie. All right, anything else on this one? No? All right. I wanted to talk about the ending. Something I noticed when I was rewatching the movie, when I was playing over clips to come up with questions for this show, is the ending is kind of left ambiguous if you think about it. So the ending of Baby Driver has Baby finally getting out of jail on parole and being greeted by Debora with a car. However, over his time in jail, neither Baby or Debora ages if you look at them afterwards, making the audience wonder whether what happens in the end is real or whether it's just in Baby's imagination. He's just imagining getting out on parole, and he's imagining living the rest of his life out with Debora. So what do you think about the ending?
That's actually an interesting thing that I haven't really ever thought of. I've watched this movie probably maybe like 3 times in the past, not including the viewing that we did. I never really thought about like the ending possibly being fake, because everything leading up to it, whether it was the scene of the lady who Baby carjacked in order to escape, or Joe coming up for testimony, or even Debora speaking, I always felt like that lead up was meant to be a literal, I suppose, case for Baby's innocence. And even though they kind of foreshadow the very ending of Debora sitting near the car, and in theory it could be in his imagination, I feel like the whole good behavior and the letters that he receives in prison are real, and so the ending is real. I don't know.
I would agree with him. I feel like the ending's real just because I want it to be. Not just because I want it to be, but because when he first had that dream about seeing Debora in front of the car, it was in black and white. And then when it happens at the very end, it becomes colored. So it just strikes me as a detail that points to it being more real than not real. It's a good way to think of it, though, being not real in a dream.
Kind of like he's realizing the dream, I suppose.
That could be it, yeah.
I think it's the black to white, or not the black to white, the black and white to color.
Yeah.
At the end, because when we see Debora in that like dream sequence, which she's standing by the car, it's all in black and white. But in the end, it turns from black and white to color, and the perspective shifts. Instead of just being looking at Debora, it shifts to being Baby with Debora. And them, riding away into the sunset, into their happy life.
It also didn't show the jail in the first black and white version.
Oh, really?
That is true, yeah.
Yeah.
What was in the first...
I don't know if it looked behind Buddy in the
They
first.
didn't. They just showed the car, and they showed Debora.
Oh,
because that was that was Baby imagining what his like ideal life would be like. It's Debora and him on the road. Right. And I think the reason it's black and white, and the reason they chose to make it black and white, is it's not real yet, it's dreamlike, and he's being held down by his life of crime. And as soon as he's freed from it, as soon as he leaves prison, boom, it shifts into color. That's real.
I think the whole ideal life thing is an interesting point to come up. Is like how he, in some ways, is realizing that dream when he's running away from the police, because it is him and Deborah on the run, on the road, but it's not in the ideal situation, I suppose. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why he gives himself up, you know? He realizes he can't live life like this. He doesn't want her to live life like this. Mm-hmm. And it's like you said earlier, it's the "you don't belong in this world" quote that Baby says before he gives himself up. Mm-hmm. Is him passing on what Joe told him earlier, and he's giving himself up. He's finally atoning for his sins. But you see people come to his side. You see people say, oh, he's not a bad person. He's a person put in a bad situation that had to adapt.
Yeah. I think an interesting and kind of quite comical moment in the movie was the period in time where he was simply just a pizza delivery driver. Like, I think it was very purposeful, this point in which the director put that scene in, and it's like a rest before the final act of the big job on the Postal Service office building. Something I don't think we really covered too much was how funny the movie is. Like, there's moments that are just straight funny and that do make the movie kind of feel not so realistic. So, like, even in the armored truck robbery scene where he's like, wait, I need to restart the song before they start going again. It's kind of just a jarring thing that happens in that scene that breaks you out of the action and makes it a really awesome movie too.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Okay, so let's move on to performances. Lots of great performances in here. Yep. Whether it be from Ansel, whether it be from Jon Hamm, from Jon Bernthal, there's a lot of great performances. Which character do you think has like the best performance overall?
Go first.
I kind of want to say Bats.
Jamie Foxx kills it, yeah.
He does kill it. Other than that, probably Baby. I think he does a great job too.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to bring up about Jamie Foxx is usually Edgar Wright doesn't allow improv in his films. He didn't allow improv in Baby Driver, except for Jamie Foxx. And Jamie Foxx saying, that's some Oscar stuff, after Darling gave that like whole speech about like, you don't want to see my buddy get mad. It was a little cheesy, I admit.
A little bit corny. No?
A little corny. Jamie Foxx saying, that's some Oscar stuff, you know, bleeping out what he actually said.
Yeah.
But that was not planned. That was just him coming up with it on the fly. And I think that's just a really great line to add in there. Bats' character is very impulsive. Mm-hmm. He tries to be a little bit of a comedian. He definitely has a little bit of that toxic masculinity energy, where he feels like he's above everyone else, and he's talking down to them.
I would say, I would agree. My favorite performance was probably Jamie Foxx's Bats, because it's... all of the other characters are kind of very stereotypical, villains. There's Doc, who is the refined criminal, the gentleman criminal. There's the extremely violent, kind of concealed, violent person that is Buddy. There's, I forgot who the Asian guy was, but he's also the stereotypical kind of, street gangster or whatever. But JD, yes. But then there's Bats. And even though, you could put him into some sort of stereotypical character, Jamie Foxx's performance made it very special. Like you said, the whole improv bits, his presence within the crew also is like a big dynamic change, because you can see the headbutting between Buddy and Bats when it comes to Darling, or him initiating the fight with the weapon suppliers when that was against the plan. So I think it's just very interesting. His performance and his character was very interesting too.
Yeah, he's a wild card.
Yes,
He's something that really makes the plot interesting because up to that point, most characters behave how we like think they'll behave, like normal people. And then Bats is this crazy dude who's out here. He guns down the contacts of Doc, and that changes the dynamic of things.
Yep.
And just the things he says and the things he does makes him a wild card and makes the plot really chaotic, but in a good way. And for me, my favorite performance is actually that of Buddy, played by Jon Hamm. Mm-hmm. He's so much of a menacing villain without having to be like walking around the entire movie being like big and tough, because he actually befriends Baby at some point. You know, they start listening to music together, and he uses Baby's killer track, Bright and Rock from Queen, as the final fight scene for the movie. And it's just really epic. It all culminates because we learn who Buddy is. Buddy has a romance with Darling. We learn a little more about him. Buddy doesn't seem like too bad of a guy. But then we get to the point to where Darling is, spoiler, of course, but where Darling is killed.
Yep.
And Buddy just loses it. And you could see throughout the movie, if you go back, that he's just like, he is a powder keg waiting to explode. And Jon Hamm plays that so well.
Speaking of that, you know the whole corny speech that we talked about from Darling? That was kind of like a foreshadowing of that snap. So, which is making that connection. Is
yeah, it was foreshadowing. It was a little obvious foreshadowing. Yeah. But it was good foreshadowing. And it set up that final act of the movie and that final fight, which I think has some great action choreography in it. So I think the jumping over the car is such a cool stunt. Mm-hmm. I mean, realistically, your legs would be just completely gone. But it's so cool to be jumping over the car and the use of the parking garage. Because you wouldn't think a parking garage would be like the final fight of like a heist movie, but it ends really well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it comes to Baby Driver, another thing that's important about the movie is costumes. I wanted to bring this up quickly, not a huge discussion point, but they actually have Deborah and Baby contrasting costumes a lot, like one wearing white, one wearing black, in order to kind of add a little contrast to their romance, add a little bit more depth to it. And I think costuming is such a big part of making a movie that has color, that has stylization like this pop. And, oh my gosh, the style of this movie is great. It's fantastic. The cuts are good. Did you guys have any gripes with the movie? Anything you wish were a little bit better?
I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I couldn't really point out any point that I felt was weak in the plot or the characters. To the whole style thing, I thought the entire movie was like super colorful and very vibrant, or like you said, alive. And so I didn't really notice the whole wardrobe changes thing, but that's a good thing to point out too, yeah.
I think one thing, it's not a gripe, but it's something that I noticed, is that the plot isn't super complicated. And I really appreciate that. It's a simple heist movie plot. But that doesn't mean simple's bad. Simple movies can be amazing sometimes. Some of the greatest films of all time have simple plots. And what I think is interesting is that when you have a simple film, like a simple plot, and it's done okay, you'll forget it. But if there's a simple plot and it's done fantastic, if it's perfect execution of a simple plot, it can be an unforgettable movie. It's a staple of cinema for years to come, and that's what I think Baby Driver is. It's simple, but it does everything so well that it heightens it. Of course, you always have your Christopher Nolans with stuff like Inception and The Prestige, which are complicated plots that are done incredibly well and are amazing pieces of film. But in something like Baby Driver, you don't need a complicated plot to get your point across. It's a love story, it's an action movie, and it's funny. And overall, the relationships of the character and everything just ties together really well. Well, that's going to be all for us today. That's all we have time for. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, everybody wants happiness, nobody wants pain, but you can't have a rainbow without a little rain. And we will see you again on the next episode of Rebel Film Friday.